You know, for me, one of the main things that I look for gaming is the ability to kind of play on the go, because I do travel a lot, and one of my favorite consoles is the Game Boy Advance, no surprise. Now, I started my handheld experience with Nintendo with the original Game Boy, the DMG, and I have one. It's right here. It's the one Retro Rob redid for me, and I love it. It's a fantastic machine, but the one I think of, the machine I think of when I think about handheld gaming with Nintendo is the Game Boy Advance. We're going to talk about it today. Hey, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for your understanding as I was taking some time off this past weekend. I didn't have a video up last Friday, but needed a little bit of a rest, needed a little bit of a relaxation, and I'm coming back recharged. And I really have to thank Radical Reggie and Metal Jesus for that, because their video about the GBA buying guide that they released this past Friday I thought was fantastic. And it really got me to think about the console and the things that I really like about it. So I want to talk to you about the console itself, about the system, what my memories of it are, and then the games I really love playing on it. So it's going to kind of be all-encompassing. I hope you guys enjoy it. Now, of course, you can't talk to Game Boy Advance without talking about the original. This is the widescreen edition, the one that's very comfortable in the hands. I think it is actually a little bit more comfortable than the SP is, but it was something that I didn't actually own until recently. I picked this up at, I want to say CorgsCon a couple of years ago. I picked this up from Mr. Rightway. And it was something where I wanted to get an original GBA because I'd never actually owned one. I'd played on it, but I'd never owned one before. So I picked this one up, but this wasn't the only option for playing Game Boy Advance games. There was also, of course, the GBA SP, and this is the one that made me want to get the system, because I remember seeing this advertised and I was just blown away by the design of it. And this is my original NES edition. We're going to unbox everything in here. The only thing that's not in here is the charger, because the charger is actually plugged in. I'm pointing, like you guys can see me. It's plugged in over that way. But we'll get everything unboxed on here so you can see everything that comes with it. It's original instruction book, the health and safety manual, the GBA SP, built-in lighted screen-ish, Nintendo Power subscription card, and then, of course, the unfilled out registration card, because why would I fill something out and register something that I want to take care of? But, you know, it's in here. One of my favorite things that actually came in the GBA SP box, though, was this here. This is kind of a showcase of some upcoming RPGs on the GBA, which I was just blown away by, because when I got this made me want to play games just like this one here, just like Fire Emblem, which was something I had never played until Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, and spoiler alert, that'll be coming up later. But I just thought this manual was really neat. It showed off some really promising titles. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is legit so good, and it was just fun. You know, it was just really cool. It was my first time I'd ever seen anything about Golden Sun. I had heard about Advance Wars. My friend Corey had a copy of it, and I had played that, and of course I had played Mario and Luigi. But yeah, this booklet just really introduced me to so many possibilities of what was available on the GBA. But of course, the thing we're here to see is this guy right here. Now, I love this machine. You can see it is worn out, it is beat up. It is something that I had as my everyday carry for a long time. I used to take this to work at EA before I got my DS. I thought it was a beautiful machine, and I really loved that it gave you options, because it wasn't just Game Boy Advance games you could play. You could play Game Boy games, like Batman here, and it plays it in color, which I think is just super cool. You could play, of course, Game Boy Color games, which was awesome. And those look great. But the main thing it was here to play was GBA games. God, do I love that sound. And these just looked incredible. This is a 32-bit system. It was 32 bits in your pocket, which was just amazing, and it played so well. Now, the only thing that I don't like about this particular GBA is that it is front-lit and not backlit. Now, the AGS 101 will be a backlit screen, and I have been so gun-shy about actually modding this machine and putting a backlit screen in that I feel like I'm kind of doing it a disservice, because this thing would just be stunning with a backlit screen on it. Let me know what you think. Should I mod this to have a backlit screen? Let me know. You could, of course, also play GBA games on the original DS. This is actually my launch day DS, and this is one that I had given to my mother-in-law that I got back after she had passed away. And this is we shared a love of video games, which I thought was super cool, and this is something she used to play her Game Boy Advance games on and her DS games on, and it was mine before that, and I love that she held on to it and that she had it for so long, and that I was able to get it back. It's got a very special place in my collection. This is actually my current preferred way to play a GBA game, and that is the DS Lite. Now, the only negative side of the DS Lite is that it will not take original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. It has no problem with GBA games, and you're going to see exactly how pretty the screen is when you have a backlit screen instead of a front. Like, look how bright that is. It's just gorgeous. You'll actually see some gameplay for Yoshi Topsy Turvy here in a little bit to show off how nice it looks, but we're going to do a side-by-side now between this and the original SP, so you can see the vast difference in quality of the screens. But this is just such a fantastic machine. I love it. The DS Lite is just brilliant. It's such a great machine, and this is, like I said, if I'm going portable, this is my preferred way to play. You know, before I forget, there's another fantastic console here that is great for playing Game Boy Advance games, and that's the Wii U. And while the Virtual Console might be dead and gone now, since that store has been shut down, there was ample opportunity to get some fantastic GBA games to play them on here, and they look spectacular. We'll go over a few of those games here in a couple minutes, but in particular, this was my favorite way to play some of the big ticket, expensive GBA games that I wasn't going to be able to afford. Got to play them here, and that was really awesome. Not the only way to play GBA games, though. There are, of course, other ways to play. You can emulate if you so desire. There's tons of Game Boy Advance emulators out there, and I actually play all of my GBA stuff, and the stuff you're going to see captured for footage today, with the exception of Yoshi Topsy Turvy, because of the requirements to move things around and to actually have, tilt functioning, the gyroscope moving, is on my Retron 5. There's also the Retron SQ, which is designed to play Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance games, but I didn't pick that one up because my 5 is just fine. I didn't really have to worry about it. But let's take a look at some games now that I love on the GBA. I do love a good collection of games, and this is one of my favorites, Pac-Man Collection from Namco. If you've been on the channel for any amount of time, you know I do like collection games, and this is one that, as someone who grew up a fan of Pac-Man, and that might be my first video game love, it's kind of neck and neck with Popeye and Donkey Kong there, but Pac-Man is something I vividly remember playing as a kid, and when I was able to get an arcade port of Pac-Man on a Game Boy Advance cartridge and carry it around in my pocket, that was pretty cool. But you toss in something like Pac-Mania, which is my personal favorite Pac-Man game, onto the cartridge as well, along with Pac-Attack and Pac-Man Arrangement. This went from this is a really neat collection to this is a must-own for me, and I am so stoked that I have it because it's just put together so very well. If I owned them all, they would all be on this video. This is Castlevania Circle of the Moon. The Game Boy Advance Castlevania games are absolutely spectacular, and this is just the only one I own right now. I am on a quest to get them all, but this is the one I've got, so let's take a look at Circle of the Moon. One of my favorite experiences really on any gaming console is finding a Castlevania game, and for years I have been tracking down the ability to play the Castlevania games on the Game Boy Advance. And I thought my answer was just getting the Castlevania Game Boy Advance collection on the Switch, but I recently found Castlevania Circle of the Moon for a very good price, and I decided to pick it up. Now, if you haven't played these are the kind of successors, the spiritual successors to Castlevania Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation 1. It's the same kind of game, basically. A Metroidvania/RPG that is just spectacular and just incredibly fun and perfectly well designed. Gotta thank Radical Reggie for introducing me to this one. This is Lady Sia. This is legitimately one of the best action platformers on the console. On a handheld that is replete with amazing action platformers, this stands head and shoulders above most of them. Big thanks to Radical Reggie for suggesting this one on one of the GBA Hidden Gems videos that he did with Metal Jesus back in the day. And this, of course, is Lady Sia. I remember seeing this when he talked about it and kind of being blown away by the concept of it because it was a hack and slash platformer, and that's not something I'd ever really seen on the Game Boy Advance. It was something that I was familiar with from the 16-bit generation, like Pirates of Dark Water on the Sega Genesis is one of my favorite games of all time, but that genre and that kind of approach to a platformer had been fairly well ignored for years at that point. So seeing this and being able to play it and tracking it down, I found this at Torg last year in Columbus, Ohio, was something that I just adored, and I'm so happy to be able to play it. Reggie has incredible taste in games, and this is one of the strongest suggestions he's made on the GBA because it was something I'd never heard of, and I was glad to take a chance on it just based on the footage I saw and how glowingly he spoke of it. Do I really need to introduce this one? I don't, do I? It's Super Mario Bros. 3. It's the best version of Super Mario Bros. 3, and Mario Brothers is on it as well. Super Mario Advance 4 is perfect. You know, part of me really wanted to kind of wax philosophically about Super Mario Bros. 3 here and kind of be almost romanticizing the importance of this game and kind of go in depth and talk about how unbelievable it is and why it's on this list and why I keep going back to it and why it's so important and why it's one of the best games of all time. But we've all played it at this point, guys. You know why it's on this list. It's Super Mario Bros. 3. Next game. Big thank you to my friends at Into the AM. I have been a fan of Into the AM for a few years now. They actually were a sponsor last year on the channel, and they're back again this year, and I cannot thank them enough for doing so. Not only because they're helping the channel out immensely, but also because these shirts are amazing. I absolutely love Into the AM's designs. I have been a big fan of t-shirts like my whole life. I mean, I'm kind of designed for comfort, and one of the things I like about Into the AM is that their shirts just fit. I think they look good, they fit good, they're not expensive, and on that note, you can click the link in the description down below to take a look at the catalog that they offer. Be sure to use code STAYSQUARE when you check out to save 10% off your entire order. Again, thank you so much to my friends from Into the AM, and I really do dig this shirt. I love the green, and I think we need to talk about someone green right now on the GBA. Let's take a look at Yoshi Topsy Turvy. Now, I've said it before on the channel, and I will say it again. I love games with a gimmick. I love a gimmick on a game. I think it's fantastic. And Yoshi Topsy Turvy makes use of an accelerometer in the cartridge, and I think that is absolutely brilliant. Now, I want to apologize for the quality of the footage you're seeing here. I had to record this on the console as opposed to, you know, any other way I have to play it because it just wouldn't work on the Wii U or work on an emulator. I needed the accelerometer. So here you see it. Is this a perfect game? No. Not by any stretch of the imagination. I think it is actually probably more flawed than it is fantastic, but I love a gimmick. And this is something that when I saw my friend Kevin had it for sale, I jumped on it because I wanted to have it. I love a gimmicky game. Up next, let's take a look at Sonic Advance 3. I picked this one up recently for the Summer of Sega, and I'm very happy I did because Sonic Advance 3 is a hell of a lot of fun. For something that I kind of thought was going to struggle a little bit performance-wise on the GBA, this thing screams. It is so fast on the GBA, and it looks so good. It's a true Sonic adventure, and it's something that I didn't go in with the highest of expectations. I was told by a couple of people that it was really good, but it wasn't something I had ever really played, so I wasn't really anticipating anything out of it. Like I said, I was kind of expecting it to perform poorly, and instead, I'm getting a super fast game with great animation sequences. Like, the animations on Sonic and Tails are fantastic. I haven't really gotten to anyone else yet. I haven't beaten the game yet to unlock anyone else, but I'm going to assume that the animation sequences on Knuckles and everyone else are great as well. But I just think it's a really wonderful game. It's got the right kind of Sonic challenge. It's Sonic unfair at times, which Sonic can be, and I think it's great. It's a wonderful title. I really want to track down the first two as well now that I've got this one, because I want to have the whole adventure. Just talked about this the other day. This is a legit fantastic hidden gem on the Game Boy Advance. This is Lilo & Stitch 2 Hamsterville Havoc. Now, I do love a licensed game, so I might be predisposed to this one, but I do think this is one of the best run-and-gun shooters on the console, reminiscent of Alien Hominid. I just talked about this one recently, so I won't spend a lot of time on Lilo & Stitch 2 Hamsterville Havoc, but if you like Alien Hominid, if you like run-and-gun shooters, if you like Metal Slug, this and its prequel, Lilo & Stitch 1, I guess not really technically a prequel, it's just its first game in the series. This is the sequel to that game. It's been a long day, but you need to add both of those games to your collection immediately because they're both fantastic. Don't let the subject matter and the fact that they are Disney Interactive Studios games dissuade you from getting them. They're amazing. I cannot recommend either of them enough. And thank you to Metal Jesus for suggesting these, because as much as I love Lilo & Stitch, it's my favorite Disney movie, I was not going to pick up the video games until I saw his Hidden Gems video suggesting it. I unabashedly love the first Final Fantasy game, warts and all. I think it's brilliant. And this, to me, is the best version of the first game. This is Final Fantasy 1 and 2, Dawn of Souls. Now, I know that the original Final Fantasy hasn't aged terribly well, especially when you compare it to other entries in the Final Fantasy series, and Final Fantasy 2 is a little bit clunky, but when you package them up together and you shine them up real nice and you put a nice fresh coat of paint on them and make them look real pretty, you get Final Fantasy 1 and 2 Dawn of Souls, and it is one of my favorite collections on the GBA. I am a sucker for the Final Fantasy series. I really do enjoy the first one, despite all of its flaws. And this version on the GBA might be my favorite version of it ever released, because there's just so many additives and so many things tossed in that just improve it and plus the game out the gate. And my favorite, of course, is the bestiary, because you're able to collect all the creatures in the game and like view their stats and view information on each one from the main menu, and I just think it's wonderful. It's not going to be for everybody, don't get me wrong, but for me, this is just such a fantastic addition to a GBA library and a wonderful collection of games. And I will never stop talking about this game because it is a legit hidden gem on the console. This is Fantastic Four Flame On, developed by the Fantastic Tour software. The guys who made the brilliant Invincible Iron Man. Fantastic Four Flame On is spectacular. I didn't know what to expect from this game when I got it, and I've talked about this game numerous times on the channel in the past, so I won't spend a ton of time on it, but Fantastic Four Flame On, legitimately one of the best superhero adaptations for the Game Boy Advance. It is a amazing adaptation of the character of Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four. You get to play as the Human Torch, you fight Skrulls, the gameplay is amazing. It's developed by Taurus Interactive, who also did the Invincible Iron Man, and they don't miss. They don't miss. They're just brilliant. Play this game. Track it down and play it if you can, because it is just a marvelous, marvelous title. They say you never forget your first, and this is Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, the first Fire Emblem game I bought, the first Fire Emblem game I played, and to this day, my favorite Fire Emblem game. Like I mentioned, Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones was my first Fire Emblem experience. I found this there was a Kmart in Oviedo, Florida that always had GBA games on clearance, and I found this for, I think, $7 in a bin. And I picked it up, and I have zero regrets because I absolutely adore it. I think it is a wonderful game, memorable characters, fantastic combat experience, and like proper Fire Emblem hard. It is a very, very difficult game. Frequently unforgiving, if I'm being honest with you, but it's still just, it's fun. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. If you dig the Fire Emblem series, I urge you to track this one down and play it, because I do think it is one of the stronger entries, especially on what was the GBA, which was our introduction to the Fire Emblem series here in the West, outside of Roy and Marth being in Smash Brothers. But I do think it's wonderful. I really do like it, and it is my first Fire Emblem, so I'm probably a little bit biased as far as like why I think it's so great, but I love it. I can't pass it up. It's something that I play through probably every 2 or 3 years, and I think it's wonderful. And thanks to Radical Reggie and Metal Jesus for this one, Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. One of the best beat-em-ups on the console. It is absolutely brilliant. I've been chasing this game for a few years now, and I just found it within the last couple of months, and I have no regrets picking it up. It is absolutely brilliant. And one last set of flowers to Reggie and Metal Jesus for talking about this game on one of the Hidden Gems videos. This is Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. Now, I am a huge Star Wars fan, but there was a lot of Star Wars games for a long time that were really... This was not on my radar for something that was going to be good, but when they showed it off and they showed how intriguing of a beat 'em up it was, I wanted to track it down. And I have legitimately been looking for this game for like 4 years, and I hadn't found it until recently, and I picked it up, I want to say at Korg's this year, and it was something that when I found it, I immediately jumped on it, because I know locally it does not show up. Our Game Boy Advance scene here locally is really small. Like my preferred store, Replay It Retro, has a fairly tiny selection of GBA games. The bigger store here doesn't really have anything interesting. Lots of copies of Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen games if you want any of those guys, but the actual like interesting games, they don't really have much. So it's hard for me to track down intriguing GBA games, but I was happy to find this at a convention, and it works really well. You can play as Obi-Wan or Anakin. They have their force powers. It's a really fun, kind of interesting take on what Star Wars as a beat 'em up could be. One of the best Zelda games ever made. I do think that Minish Cap is unfortunately overlooked for stuff like Link to the Past, when I personally think this is a better game. Yup. Come at me, haters. I do think Minish Cap is a better game than Link to the Past. That is not to say that I think it's the best Zelda game of all time, but I do think that it does something incredibly different and completely unique when the Zelda series kind of rests on its laurels a lot of times, and it was the right move to have an external developer make this game. It's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. It has some of the best graphics in the Zelda series. The gameplay is unique and different and fun, and that's why people clamor for a remake of this game, because it is legitimately spectacular. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Link to the Past is a bad game. I just think this one's better. It's not as good as Link Between Worlds, but it is better than Link to the Past. Car Battler Joe is one of those interesting games that I really didn't know what to anticipate when I picked it up, because, I had never played it before. It's always been kind of habitually expensive. so I wasn't willing to really fork out the cash for a loose copy of the cart, and certainly not for a CIB copy. I mean, that's going for over $400 right now. But when I saw it was available on the Wii U Virtual Console, I decided to give it a shot. It was something that I'd heard my friend Corey talk about, and I wanted to give it a play. And it's really fun. It's an interesting mix of both RPG elements and vehicle combat, and it just works. It's a solid game. It's really fun, and it's something that was truly unique for the time. I'd never played anything like this, and I still haven't. Here's another one that I played on the Wii U just because the cost of the cartridge is kind of cost prohibitive, and this is Drill Dozer. This is such a brilliant game. This is from Game Freak. This is from the guys that do Pokemon. This is just a completely new kind of game for them. Like I mentioned with Yoshi Topsy Turvy, I do love a game with a gimmick, and this one has a gimmick as well. It had a rumble pack built into the cartridge. And I have this, like I said, on the Wii U, so I don't really have to worry about that. I don't have that kind of experience of having the GBA rumble. It just works on the controller. But it's still a really fun game, even consoleized. It's just a quality platforming kind of adventure game where you have to collect more gears to be able to drill further into the game. I love it. Here's one that I just picked up, I think at Korg's this year, and this is just such a wonderful title. Mega Man and Bass, absolutely brilliant, plays beautifully well, just so much fun. You didn't really think we were getting through a video about games I love on a Nintendo console and not mentioning Mega Man, did you? I mean, I could have gone with Mega Man Battle Network. Any of those are fantastic. I own several of them. But instead I wanted to go with Mega Man and Bass, which is something that I just recently acquired, but I haven't really been able to put down because it's really goddamn good. You get to play as Mega Man or Bass. The game differs based on which one you're on. This takes place after Mega Man 8, so it kind of continues the storyline of the core Mega Man franchise, which is really speaking my language, and I just really enjoy it. I think it's kind of fantastic. It's the right kind of difficult. It does get a little bit frustrating at times, but I mean, what Mega Man game doesn't? And I love that we got this like years after it dropped on the Super Nintendo. We got it ported and localized over here in the States. That's pretty cool. Talked about this one when I showed off that booklet that was in the SP box. This is kind of a forgotten IP from Nintendo that the fans haven't forgotten about whatsoever, but they sure do have seemed to ignore it. This is Golden Sun. As someone who grew up loving the Shining Force series, seeing that Camelot Software kind of graduated and started working on stuff for Nintendo and created the Golden Sun series just filled my RPG-loving heart with joy. And we got something really magical here, and it's so unfortunate that Nintendo just ignores this series almost completely because there's so much promise here for this IP. Don't get me wrong, I love Camelot's work. I love that they make the incredible Mario sports games, but man, I would love to see a return to the Golden Sun universe just because there's so many amazing characters and so much potential for fantastic games to be made in this universe, but I don't know that that's ever going to happen, and that makes me sad. But hey, they've surprised me in the past. Nintendo could whip out a brand new Golden Sun game for the launch of the Switch too. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, that's certainly not everything I play in the Game Boy Advance. There's plenty of options out there. I've talked about the Capcom Classics Mini Mix recently. I have played literally every Pokemon game ever released for the Game Boy Advance, so there's plenty of other ones out there. These are just the ones I grabbed right now. This is not a comprehensive end-all be-all list. These are just ones I'm digging right now. If you could pick one game to add back to your GBA collection or to add to your GBA collection that you don't have, what would it be? Now, conspicuous by its absence in this video, I do not have a GBA Micro. I wish I did. That is one of my favorite ways to play a Game Boy Advance game. We used to have them at EA when I worked there, and I wish I had snagged one before I left because I thought it was a magnificent machine. And there's no real wrong way to play one of the best handheld consoles of all time, whether you're talking emulators, whether it's on your phone or on something like an Anbernic, or you're using a clone console like the Retron 5 or the Retron SQ, or running original hardware. You can't go wrong playing any GBA game. What are your favorite GBA games? Let me know in the comments down below. What's your favorite way to play the GBA? I'd love to hear that as well. Till next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.